Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, ensuring a better life for Georgians in the 21st century. More than 100 programs of study prepare students for successful careers in the critical professions of education and nursing, as well as business and the liberal arts. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
And by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
Coming up on Lawmakers, a bill that would allow Georgia Power to charge consumers for the construction of future power plants passes the Senate. Legislation aimed at preventing another school board crisis like the one in Clayton County is heard in a Senate committee. And a look at the loser pays tort reform legislation. The governor says it will reduce what he calls frivolous lawsuits. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. Here are your anchors, Wandi Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, a bill establishing the sentence of life without parole for murder comes one step closer to becoming law. And Democrats in the Senate introduce more 5 for Fighting legislation, which aims to help Georgia's veterans.
And a $10 passenger vehicle fee is proposed as a way to help fund trauma care. But first, our top story tonight, the Senate passes the Georgia Nuclear Energy Financing Act. The Georgia Nuclear Energy Financing Act did pass on the Senate floor today after a lengthy debate. Lawmakers Brittany Evans is live at the Capitol with the details on that. Brittany.
This bill has seen opposition in committees and subcommittees, and it was no different today in the chamber. Nearly an hour and a half of debate today, and 3 new amendments led to SB 31's 38-16 victory.
If this bill passes, this bill is good for the individual consumer. This bill is good for the homeowners. This bill is good for every homeowner. It's also good for businesses. And it also is good for homeowners because if this bill passes, there's going to be more jobs. There's going to be less unemployment. And this helps reduce interest rates. This is a huge economic impact that helps us be competitive with our other southern states.
The Georgia Nuclear Energy Financing Act allows utility companies to charge customers to cover the cost of building nuclear power plants before those plants are built. Today in the Senate, Senator Balfour's bill received strong opposition from lawmakers, including Democratic Whip Senator David Edelman, who said that the utility rate decision should be left with the Public Service Commission.
It is a bad idea for you to inject yourself into this system, substitute your judgment for that of 5 statewide elected officials, force them to engage in piecemeal rate making, and I mean this respectfully, to do so without the background, without the special knowledge, without hearing any real meaningful testimony from subject matter experts.
Democratic leader Senator Robert Brown also voiced his opinion against SB 31.
This is a complicated, big bill that does one wrong thing. And that one wrong thing is just its very presence in this body. It doesn't belong here. This is not the place to make this decision. We have the PSC to make this decision. But since it's here, let's examine it a little bit. Okay, now with this accelerated rate tax increase, what we are talking about doing is making it possible for a company that is guaranteed a profit to make money in advance in a way that no other company can do. Nobody else can do this.
Throughout the bill's journey to the Senate floor, many have accused this bill of pandering to big business by excluding them from this payment plan. Senator Balfour vehemently denied those claims.
I was in the room when we wrote this bill, and there were no deals cut on anyone. This is good for business, yes. This is good for homeowners, yes.
3 amendments were included on SB 31 that provided more oversight from the Public Service Commission and also allowed for more financial help for seniors and low-income residents. Georgia Power customers can expect to see their bills increase by about $1.30 per month beginning in 2010. Reporting live, I'm Brittany Evans for Lawmakers.
Hey, thanks for that report, Brittany. Well, North Georgia reservoirs have taken a hit during the recent drought, and water conservation and restrictions may not be enough to rectify this problem. So today, the Senate passed Resolution 107, sponsored by Senator Chip Pearson, which urges U.S. Congress to facilitate the building of reservoirs upstream from Lake Sidney Lanier.
We are simply asking through this resolution that they recognize that this is a finite impoundment, and that the only way to secure our water future going forward would be to take this watershed and build additional impoundments up there to keep Lake Lanier's levels up, as well as provide water for all those other downstream interests going forward.
If the federal management in Washington, if they would take over, if the Corps would address our resolution that we passed last year that causes the lake to be raised from a 1071 to 1073, that we would have a reservoir that would be equal in size to Lake Seminole. Isn't that true?
The senator is correct. I believe that extra 2 feet would indeed make it like the 3rd or 4th largest reservoir impoundment in the state, just that extra 2 feet.
SR 107 ended up passing 50-1. Now, these kind of urging resolutions to Congress are quite common during the legislative session. However, Senate Democratic leader Robert Brown says even though he agrees with this particular resolution, these days they need to be careful about what they're asking for and how often.
Generally, I'm not concerned about urgent resolutions that go to Congress. But now that we have a Congress that might actually respond to it, I think we need to take an abundance of caution when we look at these resolutions, especially considering that people are looking for places to spend stimulus monies. Now, I'm not opposed to this particular resolution, but I do want to urge you that as we make these requests, that we not treat them so lightly as we have done in the past.
On the other side of the Capitol, the House today passed House Bill 71, seeking to close a loophole that provides a defense for the use of false identifications. Representatives Burke Day and Kevin Levitas explain.
It will no longer be legal, if you pass this, to print the word novelty on a license that's a legitimate, or to give it the appearances of a legitimate government document. As you can see up there, that's the GBI agent doing some undercover work, and on the back there's a strip that looks exactly like what we place on the back of ours.
Do you want, and ask yourself this question, do you want to encourage a business that goes around making, whether it's a novelty purpose or not, a fake ID? And that's ultimately what this is.
HB 71 passed 161-13 and now moves over to the Senate. The House also voted to continue offering a sales tax exemption on parts for owners of out-of-state aircraft who get their planes fixed here in Georgia. House Bill 116 extends the sales tax exemption for the sale or use of engines, parts, equipment, and other tangible personal property used in the repair or maintenance of aircraft that are not registered here in Georgia. Representative Ron Stevens explains.
An unfriendly tax structure drives away repair business so that the sales tax revenue is never realized anyway. Again, Mr. Speaker, this bill is one that only applies to those aircraft flying into the state of Georgia to get repairs on their aircraft. Some other states that already have this exemption are New York, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, and our biggest competitor, Florida, New Jersey, Alaska, Delaware, and Montana. The beneficiaries of this bill are Gulfstream and Savannah with its 6,000 employees, also in Brunswick, Standard Aero of Augusta, Hawker Beechcraft, Epps Aviation, and several other small businesses.
And House Bill 116 was adopted by a vote of 134-31. It also moves to the Senate. Finally, the House today adopted House Bill 231, which would allow interior designers to design non-load-bearing walls in certain structures. And this raised some debate about whether these designers were qualified.
Both the architects and the interior designers receive and are competent in designing those kind of spaces due to the fact that they have continuing education and life safety codes.
Is it not true that, however, while that might be true, is it not true that architects are required to take, I think, a 9-hour exam issued by the state of Georgia to certify their competency in this particular matter?
That is a true statement.
Is it further not true that interior designers have no such test on that magnitude?
On the same 9-hour test?
Yeah.
That is true, but they do have a test that they must pass for licensure, professional licensure in the state of Georgia. And I might point out that the same board has oversight over both of these entities.
Representative Duke's attempt to amend the bill failed. House Bill 231 passed 129 to 35, and it now moves to the Senate.
Legislation intended to unclog the state's court system has garnered criticism from consumer advocates who say the proposal would overturn centuries of American jurisprudence. Lawmakers Valerie Edwards joins us live from the Capitol with more. Valerie.
David, under the American rule of law, which has been in place since our country was founded, each side must pay their own attorney's fees and costs. That is, unless the court orders otherwise. That would change under SB 108, which would require the loser of a lawsuit to pay the attorney's fees of the opposing party. In a recent press release from the governor's office, SB 108 is described as a measure that would, quote, make plain that the threat of meritless litigation is not a viable business strategy in Georgia. Here's how things would work under 108. After a lawsuit is filed, the parties exchange documents in support of their argument. That's called discovery. And after each side has had a chance to review the documents, they can then ask the court to dismiss the case based on the information uncovered during discovery. If the court decides the person who filed the lawsuit doesn't have a case and the matter is dismissed, under Senate Bill 108, he would have to pay the other side's attorney's fees and costs. Senator Bill Cowsert, the measure's author, says the proposal will cut down on frivolous lawsuits.
It seems unfair to make a business or an individual have to go incur thousands of dollars of attorney's fees on a case that is completely meritless. Be careful who you sue. You know, we shouldn't just be slapping lawsuits all around against people without having grounds for those lawsuits, without being careful to make sure we're suing the right person, to be cautious and careful we're suing in the right court, and that we're notifying that person of the claim.
Consumer advocates, however, say SB 108 simply intimidates a victim into not filing a lawsuit. Buck Rogers is legislative chair for the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association.
They aim to restrict access to courts, and that will be their practical impact. Their aim may be to increase economy, but that's not going to happen. This would mean that if they're a small business or an individual, they may not be able to afford to take on a big company because they can't afford to pay the big company's attorney's fees.
SB 108 and SB 101, which gives immunity to pharmaceutical companies, are the latest efforts by Governor Perdue to attract big business to Georgia. Both measures come just weeks ahead of a major biotech conference headed our way. Reporting live, I'm Valerie Edwards for Lawmakers.
Thanks for that report, Valerie. The Senate Children and Youth Committee today heard from school board members from across the state. Now, while they favor having ethics requirements and training for school board members, there's controversy about how school board members could be disciplined under the terms of Senate Bill 84.
First, it removes the current prohibition against school board service by private school employees or members of a board of a private school. Second, it prohibits people from running for school board if they have immediate family members who are serving in one of the following positions, either a school board superintendent, principal, assistant principal, or system administrative staff. And third, it creates several new requirements for school board members. These include that you must be a citizen of the United States, you must be a registered voter, you must read, understand, and agree to abide by and disclose compliance with the Code of Ethics, a conflict of interest policy, and the required training.
Most school board members agree with some of the oversight provided in the bill, but there is almost universal disagreement with provisions allowing board members to be dismissed. Here's Katie Reeves of Fulton County Schools.
I agree with you that having some kind of a agreement across the state that we should all have a code of ethics, that we should all abide by it, that we should all have conflict of interest policies. I agree with all of that. But I agree with my fellow board members in that getting between the voters and an elected official, any elected official, school board member, city council member, state senator, is a very serious issue.
We feel like that there are some good things in SB 84. However, we have major issues with the constitutionality of the removal of school board members. And we feel like that issue needs to be resolved, not only whether the governor can remove school board members, but also if local school board members can remove their colleagues.
Clayton County Representative Roberta Abdul Salam says she tried to get the governor to intervene in her district before the system lost accreditation. SB 84, she says, is well-intentioned, but it's too little, too late.
It was very interesting to note that they did not intervene and take any action until a group of lawyers representing a special interest group asked for intervention. So it's not enough that the legislators representing Clayton County and the county commissioners and other officials representing that county and citizens and parents requested that assistance. We didn't get it until a certain group. So whatever legislation you put in place, if that's how they're going to operate, it won't make a difference.
And for the third year in a row, the General Assembly is considering revising the state's criminal code to include a life without parole sentence for murder. Senate Bill 13 would do just that. It passed the Senate earlier this month, and the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee gave it a due-pass recommendation this morning. Bill sponsor Senator Preston Smith said the bill would close a gaping hole in Georgia law.
Right now, prosecutors were unable to even seek life without parole unless certain aggravating factors existed that the code defines. So really, unfortunately, victims had to be told in a typical murder case that the perpetrator of that crime was going to ultimately be back on the street. And one of the hardest things that prosecutors had to tell victims was, in this case, there is nothing I can do to ensure that I can lock this person up forever. And oftentimes the family members and the victims of a murder in their family, their number one concern is that the person who committed the crime be locked up and never be back on the street again. And you couldn't do that under current law. In fact, in every other crime in the code, a judge has a range of sentencing options except murder. And right now, under the current state of the law, for the crime of murder, the judge has no options. His only choice is sentence the person to life, and that means eligible for parole after a period of time.
A sentence of life without parole currently can be reached, but only if the prosecutor seeks the death penalty and fails or through plea agreements, Senator Smith said. If Senate Bill 13 becomes law, it would be effective upon Governor Perdue's signature. For now, though, it heads to House rules.
3 Senate Democrats introduced legislation today designed to help veterans in areas from education to financial aid. Senator Robert Brown, who's the Democratic leader, joined me yesterday to shed light on what has been termed the 5 for Fighting agenda.
I know with the economy like it is, we have our own worries and troubles at home, but there are a lot of people away from this country actually fighting in the war. And when these people come back, and for the ones who've already gotten back, we want to make sure that we respond to their very real needs, both to their families when they are away as well as to them when they return. And there are some things that we found in Georgia that are just totally out of whack. One, for example, the definition of a combat veteran. And in the Georgia Code, that means someone who would be eligible for those benefits would have had to participate in combat prior to 1975. Well, you can see how many skirmishes and wars and combats that we've had since then. So we need to, at a very minimum, update that statute. But there are other things that we need to do as far as making it more accessible for housing for veterans. The domiciliary over in Milledgeville, for example, was closed. We need to reopen that facility. And even if every veteran does not come back, we have a moral obligation, I think, to reopen that facility and let those veterans have the choice to come back to that facility. We're talking about 81 veterans ranging from World War II all the way down to the most recent wars, and we have basically dumped them in the street. And I know people will say they've been placed in homes, but that was a camaraderie that had developed among a lot of those men and women in that domiciliary. And I think it's important for us to put the money in the budget and reopen that facility.
In other news, Representative Carla Drenner today used a morning order to advocate for Georgia State University faculty members who were summoned to testify yesterday before the House Higher Education Committee.
It is unfortunate that these professors, one of whom has conducted cutting-edge research on HIV, had to appear because of misleading accusations made from this well.
She's referring to a morning order presented Friday by Ackworth Representative Charlize Byrd.
Did you know that the state universities offer such special interest classes and expertise on male prostitution, queer theory, oral sex?
We have been told to heighten our awareness because our male children at our Regents colleges may be at risk of allegedly pedophilia-crazed professors. Such an allegation based on no proof is unsubstantiated fear and rumor mongering. We are fortunate to live in a country of freedoms, the freedom to say what we want to say, and yes, that includes the freedom to teach what we want to teach. In the end, Mr. Speaker, academic freedom is what makes our planes fly as fast as the edge of the envelope will allow. Academic freedom is what gives us great literature, and academic freedom is what makes our faith more informed.
Every senator found a sheet of paper on their desk this morning from Senator John Douglas. It contained a list of budgetary concerns dealing with the issue of illegal immigration. Senator Douglas explains why he believes many illegal immigrants are here for the wrong reasons.
This is a result of one of our counties, Gwinnett County, going through their prison population over a 26-day period and calling it out with illegal immigrants and finding out who was guilty or who not guilty, but who was suspected of these various crimes. You can look, and it's just flabbergasting that over a 26-day period, they found 13 people suspected of murder, 28 of armed robbery, 11 kidnapping, and on down the line of people waiting to be deported that were guilty or suspected of being guilty of these crimes. Now, we're told, ladies and gentlemen, for illegal immigration, that these people just come to this country because they want a job. But obviously, these people came to this country for another reason, and they did not obey the laws while they were here. This is an absolutely perfect example of why the sanctuary city doesn't work. When you have a sanctuary city, you ignore this type of thing. But there is a reason we have laws on immigration, folks, and the reason is spelled out clearly on this piece of paper.
Senator Greg Goggins introduced legislation today that would add a $10 fee to tags purchased for passenger vehicles in Georgia in an effort to fund the state's trauma care network. He took a point of personal privilege this morning to urge his fellow senators to sign on to the bill, starting with a recognizable hook from country singer Toby Keith.
A little less talk and a lot more action. My friends, it's time for us to take action. So today, what I'm doing is I am introducing a bill that will ask for a constitutional amendment to place, quote, a trauma charge of $10 per year for each passenger vehicle licensed in the state of Georgia. There are people literally crying out in this state for your support. The people traveling through this state are asking for your support. And there are people dying in need of your support. Today I'm going to put this bill over here, and I think most of you know my heart. I very seldom come to this well. And today I humbly ask that you search deep in your soul and find it, because we all have different philosophies, that you would find it in your soul to support this. A little less talk and a lot more action.
One bill that aims to make state agencies more transparent in their decision-making passed the House Government Affairs Committee yesterday. That's HB 20, and the bill's sponsor explains.
Georgia's Administrative Procedures Act is for the purpose of allowing citizens, taxpayers, vendors, members of the legislature know what rules and interpretations state agencies are making of the laws we pass. This bill helps transparency, helps inform the public. We have so much technology now that the public can read so much more about what agencies are doing. Notification of rulemakings, opportunities to participate in rulemaking discussion, all can be easier. And this bill streamlines that process, makes it more comprehensive and more consistent. I think the public is better served, taxpayers are better served, if we have an Administrative Procedures Act that is easy to participate in by the public and that we know exactly how agencies are interpreting the laws we pass.
The motion was given a due pass and will move on to House rules. That committee also heard testimony on HB 82, which would establish an Office of State Inspector General. That bill was tabled for further notice.
Nurses Day, hosted by the Licensed and Practical Nurses Association, turned into a celebration as several legislators stopped by to show their appreciation for the work that LPNs do. Lawmakers Tiana Fernandez has more.
Student nurses, working nurses, and retired nurses were at the Capitol from all over the state to learn about how they can be a part of the legislative process. Along with several legislators who offered some encouraging words, Secretary of State Karen Handel also took some time to show her continued support.
Congratulations on choosing a really terrific career, and many, many thanks to the teachers who invest your time to make sure that we have a good flow of nursing professionals coming in.
Several concerns had some nurses ready to meet with their representatives.
Nurses in general should probably have more benefits, better pay because of the things they do. I think they are very important in healthcare, so perhaps working on their benefits and their pay.
Other nurses came to meet with their peers to learn more about LPN and also shared their reasons for entering the nursing field.
I'm following in my mom's footsteps. She has been an LPN for 34 years, and I hope to become the nurse that she is today.
I just like taking care of people. It's kind of just always been something I've wanted to do. Took care of my grandmother. I was a CNA, good in anatomy, physiology. I like medicine.
Although the nurses described several different reasons why they came to the Capitol today, the one thought they all shared in common is making legislators aware of the importance of funding their nursing programs. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Tiana Fernandez.
Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the Senate is expected to take up Senate Bill 5, which would require the use of safety belts in pickup trucks. Also, two pieces of legislation that will cap property tax increases at 3% per year and freeze property valuations are expected to be heard in the House. We'll have those stories and all the latest Capitol news tomorrow on Lawmakers at 7. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. on GPB or 7 a.m. on GPB Knowledge. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Georgia Gazette. Coming up next on GPB Television, it's Georgia Traveler. Tonight's episode features Savannah and Georgia's coast. It's Georgia Traveler next here on GPB Television.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 17th legislative day of the 2009 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. Please join us tomorrow at 7 for Lawmakers. Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.